Okay, now that we're ready to get started with the rendering, let's put some tape down. Take the time to be careful and register. Okay, so I've got nice clean edges to start. One of the things that I suggested was that if your line is a little too strong, your transfer line, you can take a kneaded eraser and you can dab at it just a little bit. I wouldn't totally erase it, I'd just soften it. And that's probably just in any places that, that are going to be dark. My background's going to go right up to the edge, so that's not a big problem. But if it looks a little bit too bright, just come in and do that. Teeth are going to be light mostly, not everywhere. So, you know, I can do that too. All right. So if I see any places, then I'll pull it up a little bit. Now, I'm not going to be able to do the whole rendering. I hope you understand. It's going to take a long time. Rendering like this, if it's done well, could take 25 hours. So I'm going to focus on one area. Let's focus on the maxilla and the mandible area right here, which I think has a pretty good range of values. And then I can talk about a background up against a nice bright area here. If there's any subtleties or if there's anything else that I need to talk about, I can go farther afield. But I think I'll just focus on one area and pull that out, okay? So I'm going to start with dark umber, just like I did with my value scale. And I'm thinking, you know, that this is a mid-value, so that a lot of this paper surface is going to stay behind. But what I would suggest is start in the darkest areas, and that way it's a little bit safer. And it's always a good idea to keep a piece of paper under your hand, okay? So I'm going to start in the darkest areas because that's probably the safest area to start with. And I hope you can see that it's subtle, but there are some differences between just the paper surface and the first colored pencil. Okay. Now, you're going to be rendering right from the start. There's a lot of texture in this skull, and there isn't a lot of them. And you can't come back in later and erase and pull it out like you could with charcoal. So whatever texture you're putting in, that's why I'm using these circular little strokes. Whatever texture you're putting in, you got to put it in from the get-go. I'm varying my strokes here and there. I'm using more circular strokes where I see some of this texture. It's almost like a holy texture. And in some areas, like these teeth, doing a combination, maybe a little bit of that and some linear strokes too, whatever works. And I don't want any kind of white line in there, so I'm taking that white line out. Don't plan on sitting there and putting value and color in and then taking it out and putting it in. Color pencil doesn't work like that, but the eraser's in my hand now just so I can adjust those whites. I don't want them screaming headlights. Keep your pencils sharp. Don't work with a dull pencil. What I can highly recommend is, for a great sharpener, is these AFMAT sharpeners. You can get them online on Amazon for about 20 bucks. They give you a point like that. Working my way around down into the mandible, and still bringing some of that white out. You know, there's a lot to be said for transferring with a dark line. You just don't want a line to end up either black or white at the end of the project. So it's a little bit of both. You end up softening some of your black line too. And the safest thing is to start in the darkest areas. So that's what I'm going to do, is start with black This is really dark, as you can see on the reference, so I'm not too worried about building that up. Coming in with a really sharp point, the black pencil, and creating that shadow texture. It's inside the nasal cavity. And this is what a rendering is all about. It's time consuming, it's detailed, ultimately it's fun. If you like to do this, I love to do this. I could do this, I have done this for years. I could do this for the rest of my life and be happy, as long as I have a variety of subject matter. But there's a lot to be said for these textural skulls. I love the texture that's in these. Getting pretty far along with the blacks in this area, about as far as I want to take it. I think they're probably 70 to 80% finished. I can always come back in and strengthen the darks. There won't be any lights on the darks, so I'm not worried about that. I can just keep pushing them if I need to. But I think this is a good time to talk about background, because you are going to need a background. You're probably looking at a black, solid black background. I'm going to refer to another project that I've already done that has a background finished. Basically, the idea is that I'm going to have to come right up against this edge and create a background. That's going to take a while, and that's why this would be a good time to do it when I'm done with the two darks. Before I do the lights, I'll at least get it started. So at the end of the last video, I was talking about a background and the fact that you need a background, and your background reference photo is just solid black, so you're going to have to use a little artistic license to be able to bring some dark values up against the skull, especially on this side, and probably in the cast shadow area back here, and maybe even a little bit up here. But we'll start with the area that I'm focusing on, which is this muzzle area of this skull. So I've already started with some of these strokes in one direction, and you got to be patient with this. It's going to take a couple of hours, and it may take a couple of pencils too. So I might even suggest that at the very start of this project, and I hope I remember to tell you guys, but it's not a bad idea to go online to Amazon. They sell 3-packs of black Prismacolor pencils. You might want to get a couple. So anyway, I don't know if one's going to carry you through. What I like to do is get that black right up against the edge of the skull, and then you can freely come out with hatching. Now I'm only going to carry it down to this area right here, but what you want to do, what I'd like to do, is fade this out, this background, into probably more like paper surface, because I still want the effects of a lit ground plane down here. Okay, so that's the direction that the light's coming, this way. So it's going to be casting a shadow this way, And I'll show you on the more finished drawing what I'm talking about there. But what you may want to do is at least get it started, at least get your background started after you've put the dark values in. Let's say 70 to 80% finished with the darkest values. What I usually do, since it's a background and I want to do cross-hatching, is that I'll go in different directions, probably about 3, not 2, basically about 3 different directions for building up cross-hatching. And remember, if you get anywhere near your subject matter, which I'm not here, but keep that piece of paper handy, okay? All right, so then my next direction would probably be at a, I don't know, exact angle, maybe 45 degrees. It probably wouldn't be a 90-degree angle. I don't want to encourage that sort of perfect window screen effect. And this does take some time because I don't want to be pressing down real hard. It'll get waxy. Won't look good, won't look right compared to everything else. So it's just going to take some time to do this background. Give yourself a couple of hours easily. So I've pretty much got at least one layer here going in that 45-degree angle. So I'm going to do at least one more, and I want to find that angle that's comfortable for me to use because I want to still go across my body. I'm going to be doing this a lot. So start up here, and this feels like a pretty good direction. So I've got a more finished piece. This was from 2 semesters ago, which we did in class, face-to-face. So I don't have the skull in front of me anymore. I did it from life, but I think I can point out the things that I'm talking about with the background. So what I did on that last one, in this case, the light source is coming from this direction, as you can see that. So I've taken that background pretty much all the way out. It's much stronger right around the edge here, and then it kind of fades out up in this area. I needed a background behind the skull too. This implies a cast shadow. I think there was actually a cast shadow in the classroom, so you're going to have to probably invent one. This is paper surface, all of this up here. That's fine. There's some value changes against it, but I needed that darker value here so that I could leave a lot of the paper surface in the shadows. This is the part of the skull that's in shadow that I'd leave for the very end and deal with that last. So just like I worked on the muzzle here on the other skull, that's where the lights and a lot of the darks are. This is where the subtleties are, and I'd save that for the end and deal with that at the end. A lot of it is going to be paper surface. So cast shadow would be a good idea on a ground plane. You might have to invent that. Just make sure that it's going flat, straight across the ground plane and not up at an angle like this. I'm putting a little bit of value around the corners. I think you can see that. Kind of emphasizes that glow, that spotlight a little bit better. So again, these things are pretty much artistic license, but you need to do that to anchor the skull to the paper. I did bring my taped edge in a little bit here because I didn't want all that background. And you don't want a lot of background. This is just about right here for background. If you have to deal with that background with the black colored pencil, it's going to take you longer amount of time than you really need. Okay? All right. So that's enough about background. You need one, but let's get into the light values. Okay?